Blog Talk Radio.
Hello and welcome to Dr. Murphy's Hour of Power Without Pills. I was listening to a podcast this morning, and once again, what I'm aware of is something that Michael Brown, the author of The Presence Process, has pointed out, that there's a lot of mind-body-spirit organizations and a lot of mind-body-spirit talk. And what's missing from that equation is the heart. There's two reasons for that. One is that the heart is unconscious to us. Michael Brown says, at the age of 7, our period of being feeling creatures, or feeling beings, ends, and the predominant focus of our awareness shifts from the heart to the head, or from the emotional to the mental. In most cultures, formal education begins around the age of 7. That alone is insufficient to produce the suffering that we see in the world today. The other major event is that around the age of 7, not only does the predominant focus of our awareness shift from the emotional to the mental, but we also shut down awareness of our heart or our emotional body, because it's so painful living in this crazy world, feeling everything and being exquisitely sensitive. So we shut down awareness of our heart. We become dead from the neck down. Michael Brown calls adults dead children. So that's one reason that no one speaks of the emotional room, so to speak. For those of you listeners who are new, the work that Dr. Sklar and I and others do uses a metaphor, I believe, either created by Rumer Godden, a British author who wrote an autobiography, A House with Four Rooms, or it's an old Indian perspective that she talked about in her autobiography. Rumer Godden said, everyone is a house with 4 rooms, physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. Most people tend to live in one room most of the time. But unless you go into every room every day, even if only to keep it aired, you are not a complete person. A lot of what I listen to leaves out the emotional room, which is the most important room. And the second reason why this room, the emotional room, is either consciously or unconsciously overlooked or ignored is that the material down there in the basement, these old unresolved feelings comprised mainly of fear, anger, and grief, are very painful to re-experience. And when we experience them, we think that something is wrong. There's a quote by Arthur Miller that's brilliant, and the quote is, I dreamed I had a child, and even in the dream, I saw it was my life, and it was an idiot, and I ran away. But it always crawled onto my lap again, clutched at my clothes, until I thought, if I could just kiss it, whatever in it is my own, I could sleep. And I bent to its broken face, and it was horrible, but I kissed it. I think one must eventually take one's life into one's arms. Arthur Miller.
So, Michael Brown, thank you for coming on the show. It's an honor.
You're welcome.
Yeah, it's an honor and a privilege. I don't know what to say. I know you as the author of The Presence Process, which is a book that has been a profound tool of healing for me and for my friends and my patients. I also know you as somebody who responds quickly to emails, and I just appreciate who you are and what your writing provides for people. I'm excited to have the opportunity to bring you to perhaps a different audience. So thank you for being here. My co-host is Jonathan Tate, very familiar with the presence process. Jonathan, I think you've been through the presence process experientially 4 times. And then Dr. John Sklar, who's a physiatrist in Fort Worth, who trained with Dr. John Sarno at NYU. John, I think you've done the presence process experientially 6 times. So
7 actually, but who's counting?
So, Michael, I was watching a DVD with you recently, and you said you had no idea what was going to happen. Let's just jump off a cliff and see where we land. So, with that, I'll turn it over to you, Michael.
Well, do you have any questions in mind or anything? Because I'm open to any discussion about anything about this process and beyond.
I do actually have a question from TMS, is short for tension myositis syndrome, which is a diagnostic label that Dr. Sarno created years ago for the explosion of chronic back, neck, and limb pain. And there's a forum out there called the TMS Wiki, and people have been posting questions for you. Here's one. Hi, Dr. Frank. I'm very interested in the presence process and have already done it twice. I've also participated in the discussions on here. I have a question that I'd like to ask Michael, but unfortunately I'll be at work on Wednesday. So if you get time, I wondered if you could ask him for me. I'm a mom, children ages 6 and 7, and I'm wondering if, when, and how to introduce some of the concepts of the presence process. Does Michael Brown have any experience with this?
What we pass on to our children, what they inherit from us, and what's also invisible from us until we see it manifest in their behavior and in their thinking, is the way we relate to our own energy systems. The way I relate to my own emotional body, the way I relate to the felt experiences I'm having in any given moment is actually what I'm passing on to my children. And so there's no ways that you can go into your child's energy system and make that adjustment or fiddle with that, because that's pure interference. And so, often what we want to do is we want to turn around and fix our children when our children are really just, we've passed the baton on to them. I use that expression of from one generation to the next, we're passing a baton from generation to generation, and that's what's called the human race. And we keep running forward, just passing this baton, this energetic baton. And what it is it's a way that a pattern in our emotional body that's passed from one generation to another. So for a parent, I always say that the best way to give your children anything is through the way that you are responding to your own energetic system, because that's what they receive. And we've been told that example is the best teaching, and actually that's what that's about. So if a parent learns to respond to their own energetic system or their own felt experiences instead of reacting to them, and overcoming that addiction, the children will gain from that immensely, not only from the modeled behavior, but actually from what's going on energetically within the parent that they're around. Instead of trying to fix the child, rather set the example of an integrated way of being with ourselves.
Oh,
and also, it's not a case. It's also not a case of saving our children from the experiences that they also have to go through. One of the things we want to do is save our children from having an experience, and because we haven't yet learned or realized experientially that every experience that happens to us is valid and is required. If something happens and you can't stop it, it's because it's required, and I live by that. It's not that it's not supposed to be happening, it's required. And so if things happen to our children, and they're going to be required to go through certain experiences in life, and it's not about trying to save our children from having an experience and making sure they only have a very good one or a nice one or a perfect one or a happy one, because that's not what life's about. But rather model the behavior to them of how to respond to our experience as if it's required, if it's valid and as if it's our teaching. We rather pass that on to our children by modeling that behavior to them.
Very good. And Pandemonium 09 is her moniker on the wiki board. She goes on to ask, I kind of responded to her question by reminding her of the story of Clive and Nadine in the presence process, and she said she remembers that section, but she said, I'm thinking in more general terms. My mom taught us kids how to meditate when we were about 10 as a relaxation technique, and the other night I told my 7-year-old that connected breathing could help calm her down at bedtime, and we tried it together. Then afterwards I wondered if that was appropriate or not. Like all parents, I'm just trying to do.
Well, I think
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think the parents will know what's appropriate for their child, and it's always also about what is the intent of sharing whatever we share with our children. If I'm invalidating my own experience by saying my own experience is not valid, then I'm going to invalidate my children's experience and try to alter it in some way. So I'm all for someone coming out with a version of the presence process for children. I think it would be a fantastic thing. I've not had children. I've had cats, so I probably presence process for cats, but I wouldn't be the one to come out for children because I haven't had children. And people have often asked me about passing these principles on to children, but because I haven't raised children, I wouldn't be the right person to put that sort of thing together. And I'm also someone one day realizing that this might be a great thing, to write a children's story or to put something together to just transmit this perception of responsibility for the quality of life to children, because we don't get taught it at school, we don't get taught it from we don't even get taught it in religion, politics doesn't do it. So children aren't going to get it anywhere but from their parents, and they're initially going to directly model, themselves upon their parents' behavior. So at some point, hopefully, there will be resources like that available for children, as long as it's not trying to change or impose an experience upon them that they're supposed to be having, but rather teaching them how to honor the experience they are having as being absolutely valid and how to respond and grow from that.
Yeah, and in the area of my two boys, that's the area where it's most challenging for me to unconditionally be with my experience, and I like to say fly the plane that's on the runway.
Right. No, I take my hat off to any parent. I think being a parent must be possibly the most difficult job in the world because there really isn't a manual for it, especially for a new parent. And most parents are just children in themselves emotionally, unless someone has gone in and done immigration work. Our emotional body is somewhere between the ages of 7 and 14 years old. If we're a girl, if we're a woman, our emotional body may be closer to 14 years old. If we're a boy, it may be closer to 7 years old, because emotional development is inhibited in boys much sooner than it is in girls. So as parents, even we can be 30, 35 years old, have a well-developed physical body, going to the gym and looking after ourselves physically. We may have a well-developed mental capacity from going, studying, and developing our mental capacity. But unless we've done any conscious emotional work, any emotional integration work and work with our imprinting, our emotional body is going to be pretty much that of a child or a teenager. So for most adults having children, they are really teenagers and children having children. And that's why the indigenous countries knew this. That's why the grandparents were given charge of actually raising the child as far as teaching the children and giving wisdom to the children. The parents were there to take physical care of the children. But the grandparents, knowledge used to get passed from grandparents to grandchildren, because they realized that parents are just still children themselves. Although they can have children, it doesn't mean that they're emotionally grown yet.
Thank you, Michael. We're getting some feedback from some of the people in the chat room that your microphone is sounding echoey, but that's not my experience.
Okay, so let me try this. Okay, let me try this.
All right.
How does that sound?
All right. We'll wait.
You can ask the guys in the chat room if that's any different, because
we'll wait for.
Okay.
Now I'm hearing an echo of myself. But that's okay.
Okay, well, I'm going to rectify this.
Well, let's hear from some of the callers,
sure.
Jonathan. Jonathan, why don't you,
Yeah,
John Sklar,
can
you
you
have a
all,
question? We can test
yeah,
the
can you
audio
all,
that way.
can you all hear me? You all hearing me?
I have good audio, John.
Okay,
Yes.
so I just wanted to dovetail on the conversation thus far, so I get this question in a little bit of a different way. I get it from my adult patients about other adults in their life. So I have patients that have a pain problem, and I work with them to resolve the problem, looking at different ways to do that, sometimes the presence process, and the question invariably comes up, well, my spouse has a similar problem. How do I deal with them? Or it can be adult children. I can be dealing with a 50, 60-year-old person who has 30 and 40-year-old children that have pain problems, and how do I get them to understand how to get well? And my answer is the same, and I just wanted to point that out, is that I always tell the people that I'm dealing with, you have to do your work and serve as Michael used the term, a model or an example for how a person does their work. So it's impossible, as Michael always points out, to fix another person, whether they're an adult or a child. The way to fix the world is to fix yourself. And great evidence for that comes from my own marriage, which I tried to fix for many years without success. And then when I got to the point where I had done enough work to see myself much, much, much more clearly, my marriage fixed itself. So anyway, I just wanted to dovetail on what we were talking about.
Yes, and we can also, can you hear me because I've changed the mic situation? Am I still audio?
Yes.
Can you, okay. For anyone that is in a painful situation, it's quite quick to point them to the causality of their situation. But no matter what we tell somebody to do, see, this is the thing about an energetic transmission. If I'm telling someone to do something, I'm using the mental because I'm communicating through the mental, and I might be physically present with them, so they're going to see my body language. And what's also being transmitted is something energetically, which is the emotional content of what I'm saying. If I'm not doing unto myself as I'm telling other people to do, then there may be a mental transmission, like I give advice, but it just becomes more vice as I add to their lives. Or I transmit it physically through body language, but if I don't transmit it, the emotional component, and if I'm not doing to myself what I'm asking other people to do, they're not going to get the energetic impulse to carry out what I'm recommending. So that's the first thing. Is that a lot of us go around giving advice to people about things that we're not doing in our own lives, because one of the last things we learn to do in life is to take our own advice. But if we tell someone to do something that we're not doing ourselves, they don't get the energetic, the emotional signature in that communication, and so they're not driven to actually solve. What drives people to do things is if they get that emotional resonance from you that you actually are living that way. But on another hand, anyone who's having pain that we know of, who is not into metaphysics, who's not into reading spiritual literature, who's not into doing that much self-examination, it's very easy just to say to them, look, there's three aspects to your experience of your pain at the moment that is going on with you. And you can see them quite easily. The one is the physical aspect, which you might say the physical pain sensation that one is feeling. So there's a physical aspect going on with this, which is probably getting most of your attention. Also, there's a story you're telling about it. The name you give it, and what you tell yourself about it, how you think you got it, how long you're going to have it, what this means, and all these stories that go on. But underlying that, you can also ask the question, how does having this condition make you feel? And what you're looking for is an emotional response from that person. So does it make you feel angry to have this? Is it breaking your heart to have this? Are you afraid because you have this condition? And once a person can get to the emotional response of their condition, the thing to point out to that person then is, look, you've got to take care of the physical aspect of your pain. Go to someone who's a physical practitioner, because that's what physicians are. They're meant to work on the physical aspect of our experience. So make sure you're taking care of the physical aspect of your condition and getting as much help there as you can. If you have a lot of mental confusion around it, you can probably speak to someone that can help you with mental clarity. But if you're not taking care of the emotional resonance of the emotional state that this is triggering in you, then you're not going to the causal point. Because it's most likely that whatever symptom that's coming up, symptom is a great word, it says sometime, symptom is sometime, whatever piece of time is coming for you up as a symptom is likely to have been implanted into your experience in the first 7 years of your life, not as a mental concept, not even as an event that you may remember, but as purely an impact on your experience of felt perception, through felt perception. You got impacted on felt perception, and that felt perception was difficult for you to digest, and now because you can't digest it, you've got this indigestion, which is your symptom, and your task personally, not the physicians or the person helping you with mental clarity, but your task as an individual is to digest that emotional resonance. So if you're afraid, you have to allow yourself to feel that fear. And if you're angry, you have to allow yourself to feel that anger. And if you're heartbroken about it, you have to allow yourself to feel. And just allowing yourself to feel those feelings without trying to change them or adjust them, judge them or whatever, that is a great, that is where we start making a causal impact on the experience. But it doesn't mean we shouldn't also take care of the mental and the physical aspect. But if we're only taking care of the mental and the physical aspect and we're not taking care of the emotional aspect, then we may sedate and suppress our condition and it will be transferred and surface as something else.
Very good. And Jonathan, do you have Dr. John Sarno is on the line. Dr. Sarno is a board-certified physiatrist at NYU and a best-selling author. He is the author of 4 books. Healing Back Pain was his 3rd book. His latest book is The Divided Mind. He's also the mentor of Dr. John Sklar, a good friend of mine. Dr. Sarno, your work has made a profound difference in my practice of medicine. And so welcome to the show. Dr. Sklar has told me that you have a deep appreciation for the presence process, and I would love to hear a dialogue between you and Michael.
Okay. I'm ready.
You can start the dialogue.
All right.
John Sklar, maybe you want to set this up because, I've heard that...
Well, the interesting thing that I heard in what Michael was saying was talking about, treating a problem, a pain problem on multiple levels, but really focusing or going to the emotional level for the cure. I guess the clarification that I'm guessing that Dr. Sarno would want to offer is that really the physical treatment is just, it's really a way of recovering. It's kind of analogous to what Michael talks about in someone with substance abuse that goes into recovery. The recovery for a pain problem can oftentimes be the physical treatment or even the mental treatment, which then allows the person to recover the emotions. So I know Dr. Sarno would say that really there's almost no value once you've ruled out a very, very serious medical condition such as a spinal tumor or something like that as the cause of the pain. There's almost no value in the physical treatments, and that would be a form of recovery rather than going to the emotional level, which would be discovery. So maybe we can jump in there.
Yeah, the idea, what I say to patients is you've got to get out of the physical ballpark and into the psychological ballpark. I mean, that's the problem with most patients. They're completely preoccupied, and of course that's the purpose of physical symptomatology, to keep the individual focusing on the physical so as not to have the trouble and the turmoil and the difficulty of facing and dealing with emotional things. And that's what I find.
I think also I think also, if I go to somebody to assist me, and they are not doing causal, if they are not addressing their own experience in a causal manner, there's no way they can point me to causal integration. So if I go to somebody and they deal with their experience by talking about it, they're going to say to me, well, let's talk about it. And if I go to somebody and they deal with their experience by taking a pharmaceutical to suppress and sedate the symptoms, then they're going to say to me, take a pharmaceutical. I don't think that there are people that are, although there may be on some level of intelligence, deliberately keeping people away from the causality of their experience. And I'm open for all those sorts of dimensions of discussion too. But I quite frankly, I think that up till now, our awareness as human beings, we're only entering emotional awareness as part of our evolution. We first went through a very physical awareness, which one can say, the period of fire, food, woman, shelter, and breeding, and that was it. And then we were in a very physical existence, and then we got tools, and we started developing very much mentally. And we've gone on this complete mental tangent, which most psychological models are based out of our mental approach to our experience. And only recently, even the indigenous, if you go and speak to indigenous elders, they'll tell you, only recently has humanity entered what they call the emotional realm or emotional awareness. So I think, yes, we can go to people and ask them for their assistance, but we must always remember, if we ask someone for assistance, they're only going to be able to assist us in as much as they're able to assist themselves. They're not going to be able to assist any further than they're already taking themselves. So someone who's doing emotional integration work will immediately say, go straight to your emotions. Someone who's still in the mental and seeing things as, I have to understand this to heal it, will say, let's talk about it, let's discuss it, let's ask questions. And someone who's very much into sedating, or what we call recovery, which is usually a physical approach to it, will say, this is what helped me recover. And that's why it's very important that we be very discerning who we go to with our, if we're going to go to somebody to ask for assistance, that we go to somebody that seems to be modeling a behavior of causal activity. Otherwise, they're not going to give us a causal recommendation.
Well, I have a question for the two of you. Dr. Sarno, your book, The Divided Mind, completely undid my medical worldview. It was during reading The Divided Mind that the question, what caused the chemical imbalance, up to me to ask for the very first time. Everybody's heard depression is caused by a chemical imbalance. And it was stunning to me because what caused the chemical imbalance is as logical a question to ask as what do we do about it? And everyone asked, what do we do about it? And no one asked what caused it. And so then I came across the presence process about a year later, and both the perspectives have been very good to me personally and as a physician. And there's a conundrum that comes up a little bit where Dr. Sarno, your theories would suggest that the symptom is meant to distract away from emotional material that's threatening to become conscious. And Michael, the presence process seems to suggest that the symptom is a call to the emotional content. And I suppose they could both be true, but do either one of you have anything to say about that?
It depends whether we're responding or reacting to the symptom. So the symptom, for me, the physical manifestation is like a mirror for me. So it's really just reflecting something. And the mental body, I can ask questions and things like that to actually draw myself towards emotional situations. But all of that is used to lead me to my emotional signature. So symptoms to me are a reflection of the condition of the emotional body. So I'm not about going to try and sort out the symptoms. I have absolute faith that if I go to the causal, which is the energetic, emotion to me is just energy in motion, and unintegrated emotions are just energies that are unable to be in motion or are in motion in very dysfunctional patterns. if I am able to go and integrate that aspect of my experience, I don't have to take care of my symptom or the mental activity around it, because they will automatically align themselves with the adjustment in the emotional body. And I also wanted to add something about this question about chemical imbalance. I've never been able to monitor this, but this is my insight about this, because I don't have the equipment to do this. But I would that if I entered my emotional body and I went, for example, and worked on rage, say that I had a rageful emotional signature that I was integrating, or when that rage surfaced into my awareness, that if you measured the chemical makeup of my being, it would appear to be completely out of balance on some level. And so if I'm displaying a symptom like depression or rage or some immense sort of confusion, I'm sure it will be mirrored physically in the body as a chemical imbalance. And I'm sure that exact same measuring process, that if I go now and I integrate that rage and I allow those energies that are blocked or in a dysfunctional pattern to move again, I'm sure that one could take the same measurement and find that there is an alteration in the chemical balance. So I don't think that the chemical balance, from my point of view, is causal. It too is a symptom, a way of observing the symptom.
Well, that's what
symptomatic. Yeah.
That's what I tell patients now, is that depression causes chemical imbalances, and that it goes both ways, but obviously, or the medications wouldn't work somewhat better than placebos, but the emotional down is far more powerful than the physical up. And Dr. Sarno, I know you're...
If we want to take...
Yes.
Michael, let me ask Dr. Sarno a question, because he may have a patient waiting. Dr. Sarno, I've said many times that, and this is secondhand from Dr. Sklar, that you said The Presence Process, the best book you've ever read, has application to 100% of your patients, and that you were doing while you weren't doing the Presence Process experientially, you were doing the breathing 15 minutes twice a day. So could you, how far off base am I by saying that?
I have to say that I'm not faithful about that. Sometimes yes and sometimes no. So that I'm not very good at doing these repetitive things and so on. Obviously I don't integrate that into my work with patients. The way I deal with this whole area is to take people with physical symptoms and get them to understand the nature of the symptom and what the real reason for the symptom is. As I said before, in other words, I'm saying I've got to get you out of the physical world and get you into the psychological world. That's the only way you're going to be able to deal with these symptoms appropriately.
Right.
And Dr. Sklar has said that you're using aspects of the Presence Process in your lectures to patients. Is that right?
Actually, I was. I no longer. I've stopped doing the lecture thing. Everything I do with patients now is on a one-to-one basis, and it's been quite a while since I've discontinued doing the lectures. I felt that they essentially were hand-holding, that one had to work with patients individually in order to really get them where they need to be.
That the lectures were more of a hand-holding experience than one-on-one?
Yes, exactly.
Okay. And that's interesting, John, because that's kind of the way I've always done it, and I've found it to be very powerful to work one-on-one with somebody. I want to jump back for a minute. Frank, you asked the question about the symptom, and did the symptom distract from the emotions, or did it lead to the emotions? And I think the answer there is, and you alluded to, is it possibly both? And I think the answer is it is both. It depends on how you use it. So a symptom is a tool that we can use. And if we want to stay away from the emotions, then we can use it as a tool to stay away from the emotions and look for a physical cause. And if we want to use the same thing to find the emotions and integrate the emotions, we can use it that way. So the truth is it's a both and. It's not an either or. The symptom is just a thing. It's like a hammer. And I could use a hammer to pound a nail, which is what a hammer is meant to do. I could also use it to pound in a screw, which is not what a hammer is meant to do. But I'd still be somewhat effective using it for that. So the symptom has a purpose depending on how I decide to use it.
Mm-hmm.
And also, can I just say something about symptoms? Because we tend to relate symptoms directly to what's happening in the physical body. As in, this is a sensation that's attached to my body. It's in my muscles, it's in my flesh, it's in my bones somewhere. But also, what the presence process also puts forward is that our symptoms, sometimes we're so numb or we've covered ourselves up so much that symptoms can only appear as events happening around us. And there is intimately connected to our emotional body as the symptoms happening in the body. So, for example, if I have a pet at work who is completely pushing my buttons all the time, and then I move my job and someone else appears who does the same thing, and I move again, and it's the same thing as, I enter a relationship with a particular type of person, and I divorce them, and I enter a relationship with someone who appears completely different, and I end up in the same place. That too is a symptom. But that's just a symptom that's not connected to me physically, but it's appearing in directly in my experience. And that symptom serves the exact same purpose as the symptom that's appearing in my physical body. And I can also either respond to that and react to that. I can also use that outer symptom and go into victim and victor mode, which is the same as suppressing and sedating my physical symptoms in my body. I can go into victim and victim mode and suppress and sedate the capacity for that outer event to show me anything about myself, or I can respond to it. And that's one of the things that the presence process tries to bridge to, is to show us symptoms are in our body, but also they're all around us in our experience. Those are also our very personal symptoms.
And Dr. Sarno, I have a question from a TMS therapist, but I'm going to save it for our show next Tuesday.
Okay.
And I just want to acknowledge you, Dr. Sarno. I heard your name in 1990 on a Howard Stern radio show. I didn't look into your work until 2006, and it's completely transformed my practice of psychiatry and medicine, and I owe you a debt of gratitude. I have a great deal of respect for you, and I just wanted to acknowledge that to people online. I appreciate what you do, and your work has made a real difference in the quality of my life and my practice as a physician, so thank you.
Well, you're welcome. I'm sure. I'm delighted.
And hey, Frank, I just wanted to clarify. I believe when Dr. Sarno looked at the presence process, what he said was he thought it was a great, maybe the best description he had seen of, the unconscious things that drive the condition he calls TMS. Isn't that correct, John? You thought it was just an eloquent
yes.
description of all those processes that go on in the mind.
Yes. Right.
The good thing too is that it's been improved. There is a new edition coming out of it by the end of this month, and for about 2 years I couldn't even read the presence process myself because I could see how it fell short because of all the teaching and presentation and one-on-one facilitations I'd done. That there were more efficient ways, and in fact, one of the shortfalls of the presence process, and even though it has these shortfalls, it's still a highly efficient book, but one of the shortfalls was it did tend to cause mental activity in people by asking certain questions that would activate mental activity instead of going directly to the first part of the experience. So last year I completely rewrote the book, changed wording, vocabulary, everything, and then it was edited for about 6 months by 3 people to get it into a easier way of reading, because my style of writing is not always appealing to everybody, especially to people that are not very curious about the emotional body. They're not going to sit through the way that I write. So there is a new version of the book coming out at the end of this month, which is fantastic, and now I'm absolutely thrilled that it's up to date, with the most efficient insights I have about this. So I'm very pleased about that.
Excellent.
Mm-hmm.
Michael, Jonathan Tate has a question for you.
Hey, Michael.
Yeah.
Well, I'm excited about your next version of the book coming out. I've got it on pre-order myself, and that'll be my 5th time through. So I wanted to tell you, my wife's sitting here listening to the show, and she had a question that she wanted me to ask you. See, she says, is it common for spouses of people who do the presence process to become more present themselves through osmosis, or is this wishful thinking, since I've been too afraid to read the book myself, afraid I can't understand it and afraid I won't be able to control the outcome? That's her question.
Well, what I've discovered with this work is it is definitely by osmosis. You know, we were talking about the chemicals, and this work is alchemical. So it really is about alchemy. And alchemy is I do unto myself as I would have others do. As I operate within my own energetic system, this is radiated outward, and those around me are, through energetic osmosis, start to receive this. And the greatest place one perceives this is in a family situation. And, you know, normally someone in a family situation or in a marriage situation gets the book and does the book, and immediately they get it. They get what alchemy is and how this works, and they want to give this. Then they go and buy 6 copies, and they give it to every member of their family, and they all open the book and go, I don't read stuff like this, and put it down. And because it's actually not necessary for everybody to be reading or doing this work, and that's the nature of the work, is that, for example, what attracts 2 people together to become spouses is they somehow have a commonality in their emotional imprinting. It's the same thing as what a family, a mother and father and the children, and all those that hold the family together is a commonality in the emotional imprinting. And actually where we link to our family and where we are actually really linking to our spouse is on a very energetic level. When you're with someone long enough, especially if you're having a sexual relationship with someone, because sexuality merges us energetically with the person. Once we start impacting our own energy field, it's going to impact them. They're going to find that they're unconscious. They're going to find that the stuff that they're unconscious of starts to surface in their awareness too. And that's, you know, where we'll find when we do the presence process that people automatically move away from us or become closer to us because of the work. If they move away from us, it's because what they're really saying is, I'm not ready to look at my thing yet, and so I find it uncomfortable being around you because you're becoming a mirror for me in the way that your energy system is working. So it definitely works by osmosis, and it's not necessary for everyone in the family to be doing this work. Just one member, for example, in my family, just my mother and I have done it, and it's impacted my entire family, going down into cousins. You know, I've seen the impact go right through the family in an undeniable way. So to me, I have a great love for the radiance of the work. That's what I call the radiance of present moment awareness. It's like a nuclear reactor. When I switch it on inside of myself, it has a radiance, and that's actually that radiance kind of infects the people around us.
Thank you, Michael.
Wow.
Yeah, I think I just wanted to say, I've seen the same thing with Dr. Sarno's work, and people coming in, and I'm sure Dr. Sarno can comment on this, but people getting charged up. Oh, this is the greatest thing ever, and going and buying 10 copies of the book and finding out they can't give them away. They can't pay people to take them off their hands, right?
Exactly. And that's why I always say, to people that are doing the work, if you get excited about it, channel that excitement into your own experience. Try and contain it as much as possible, because actually it's more efficient, you or me doing the work efficiently on myself. That's going to be more efficient, have more of a power effect to the people around me than me going around handing books to everyone and trying to convince and convert everyone to something that's working for me. So it's best although we do that because we care about the people and we're enthusiastic, and the author is always very happy when you go and buy 10 copies and hand them out to people. But you will find that unless someone is ready for emotional work, you can't even talk to them about it. And unless someone is ready to look at their own fear, anger, and grief, they don't want to enter that conversation. You can't force someone to go into their own fear. It's really the heart. The way I look at it is it's the heart that decides who enters this work. It's driven by the heart.
Yeah. Jonathan, does that answer Nellie's question?
It does. She looks very happy to hear that, because I think that's been the experience we're having, is we have moved closer, and knowing that Michael says that, there was some fear that it could cause some kind of a rift, and it didn't. So I'm happy to hear that too. It's working for us.
Well, the nature of this work is that we are becoming intimate with our own inner workings, and really that's the word. We're becoming intimate with ourselves. And when I'm able to become intimate with my own inner workings, when I can be intimate with my fear, anger, and grief, and see these as worthwhile experiences out of which I grow, not as things going wrong that I'm supposed to cover up, but as things that are there for my growth, that if I digest, I get nutrition from. When I become intimate with myself in that way, I'm automatically going to become intimate with other people in my life. And so all emotional integration work leads to intimacy.
I like your play on intimacy where you say, into me and see.
Yep. Not into you and see.
Right.
Listening to all of this reminds me of Edna St. Vincent Millay's wonderful quote, "Pity me that the heart is slow to learn what the swift mind beholds at every turn." How about that?
Yeah. Michael, I have someone on. Her name is Tootsie. Tootsie and Jimmy are spouses. They're amazing people. I've witnessed their participation in the presence process, and if there was a contest to see who had the most worn and tattered copy of the presence process, I'm sure Tootsie and Jimmy would win, and Tootsie's been waiting patiently. She wants to speak to you. Tootsie?
Hello, Michael.
Hi, Tootsie.
I want to tell you that I am so grateful. I do not believe that if Frank had not introduced me or me and Jimmy about the present process, I don't know what on earth I would have done. This is the first time in my life that I have not, well, right now I am not living in drama. I had no idea about any of this until I read the book. And I thank you so much for your experience and that you had in writing it. I do have something, this is my third time through the presence process, and each time I have have seen clarity, and I am on the chapter 8. We just finished it, and I can see that there is no reason for me not to love myself unconditionally, and that I can unconditionally love my child. I'm a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. I have 41 years of sobriety, and I never, ever had any peace or understanding like I have had since I read your book. And
well, I really appreciate hearing from you about that, because I really feel what you're saying. So thank you for sharing on that.
Well, listen, Michael, I do want to ask you one thing, and I have talked to Frank about it and cleared it with him, but I wanted to hear your answer. We have had a problem with our younger son for 2 or 3 years. We have not seen him. He has not come by to see us. He doesn't call us. He keeps saying, I'm going to come by. And Mother's Day, this past Mother's Day, I just lost all I had. And I gave him a call about 5:30, and you know what he said? Happy Mother's Day. And I did not respond. And I told him, I said, Ronnie, I want you to hear this and write it down in your head or somewhere. I do not intend to live the rest of my life waiting and wanting and needing you to love me. I can't do it anymore. I don't believe that you are living according to the 10 Commandments. And I've had a bad fall, and I'm getting over it. And I said, you do not need to call his daughter, whom he has 2 daughters, whom he just totally, completely has had nothing to do with them, and they are beautiful people. And I said, you do not, and one of his daughters called him and told him about my condition. He called me.
Tootsie?
Yes?
Yeah, this is Frank. You're getting into the story. I think Michael would be most interested in the emotional signature.
Well, and exactly that's what I would say, Tootsie, is that when you bring up an image of your son into your awareness, there is an emotional signature there. That's what I was talking about, symptoms that are outside of us. They're not in our bodies, but they're actually in our experience. And so if this is an issue that's been going on in your life, and when you picture your son or bring it into your awareness, what you want to do is get in touch with the emotional signature that brings up within you. And your task is now to integrate that within yourself rather than to make it about whatever he's doing. You cannot be responsible for his experience on any level. And that's what alchemy is. When we go inside of ourselves and impact the emotional signature of an external event, and it doesn't matter what the event is, whether it's an oil spill in the Gulf, whether it's a war over there, whatever it is, an outside event that is triggering us in any way, we have the capacity to find the causality of that within our experience, within our own being, by going to the felt resonance of that. That's where we can make causal change. And, I've said this to parents before, and I've said this to children who are in difficult relationship with parents before, and there is a magical thing that happens when you go into yourself and integrate the emotional signature related to your son. The outcome of that you leave to the universe, but you will have a more impact on that experience by doing it within yourself than by anything you will ever talk to him about or discuss or think about, or any new rules you might declare with him, or any things you say to him. These things are all effects of an emotional signature unfolding inside of you. So, that's what I recommend, is that whenever your son comes up in your awareness as an issue, that you find within inside of yourself the uncomfortable felt experience related to that, and treat that as a child that needs your love. That's the child that needs your love, not the outside son, but the inner felt signature. Give that child unconditional love, just like you're saying to me now, you're learning to give yourself unconditional love. Give that felt experience unconditional love, and watch the power of alchemy.
Okay, so...
Excuse me, I'm going to have to, this Dr. Sarno, I'm going to have to leave. My schedule requires that now. I'm glad to have...
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us.
You bet.
Thank you very much, Dr.
Right,
Sarno.
bye.
Thanks,
Thanks, John. Take care.
And Tootsie, thanks for your question. Let's talk about it further soon.
I just wanted to know if I should punish myself or do anything because it was something that I felt like I had to say.
No. Those are all stories, Tootsie. That's all going into story. What I recommend to you is find the felt aspect of the experience that this experience is bringing up to you, the raw feeling that it brings up, and treat that as a child that needs love, unconditional love, within yourself, and watch how that impacts the external experience. There's nothing, everything else that you do is not going to be as efficient as that. A lot of it will just be dealing with the effect, and so will be ineffectual behavior. So,
okay, Michael, I
Thank you,
appreciate
Tootsie.
it, and I love you, and I'm so glad I got to talk to you. Thank you, Frank.
well, wonderful, and I appreciate what you've done for yourself through this work. I really thank you for that.
I do.
And thank you for showing your appreciation on this program.
Thanks, Tootsie. Jonathan, you have a caller, Luna, that has a question. Luna, what's your question?
Yeah, I'm just really curious. I've been working with kind of largely on my own, but I actually saw Dr. Sarno many years ago, and kind of with that philosophy of emotional charges or experiences or pain causing physical pain. And then I worked through the presence process this summer and really found it to be, it resonated on so many levels. And I just still, though, am kind of stuck in this experience of chronic back pain. And, I'm young, I'm healthy. And what it has done is it's created this circle of, like, self-blame and kind of just, why can't I get over this? There must be something kind of deep and dark or something wrong with my thinking and I can't get out of it. And then, of course, the pain happens and it becomes this kind of very charged circle. And, I'm just wondering at this point if I've been working on this level for, it's been almost 4 years of pain. And, if I should begin, because we're such complex emotional and spiritual and physical beings, if I should open myself up to working on a physical level to address what is psychosomatic symptoms, it seems like in Sarno's writings that's kind of a no-no. But, there's different paths. I can't really do both, I've found. I like to think, I know that this comes from an emotional place, but I'm going to work with it on a physical level. It doesn't really work that way, at least within the context of his discussion of pain. And I'm just curious about that more holistic conversation about working on the physical level with psychosomatic pain. Anybody who wants to kind of talk to that, I'd really appreciate a conversation about that.
So I'll take a stab at that. This is John Sklar, Dr. Sklar, and so Luna, I would say that you just have to stay the course. If you were my patient, and I have many patients like you, that you have to stay the course on the emotional level. You've done the presence process once. I would do it again and again and again, and keep peeling the onion, as it were, to get down to that level where you will then integrate the emotional signature, which is, causing this experience of pain. To go to the physical level, you could get some relief. And that's a tricky one with Dr. Sarno's work. Should you do something physical? You certainly should be exercising, because exercise is good for you, but not exercising to cure your back pain or wherever your pain is. But really just stay the course with the emotional level. What happens to people is these doubts come in, and the doubts then, cause you to, jump to a different path when we're already on the right path, and you didn't know it, but you were just a couple of feet from the finish line, and now you jump to a new path. So I don't know how close to the finish line you are. I don't even know if there is a finish line, quite honestly. I've done the presence process 7 times, and I don't even have pain, so except the emotional pain in my life. So I would say you got to stay with it. And the physical, if you go to the physical level, you're going to just cover things. That's going to allow you to distract from the emotions and cover them back up. So you may recover, but you won't heal. And go ahead, Michael.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Michael, you have anything on that?
Well, just from my own experience, I went through years and years and years of agony, and my body wouldn't lie. So it wouldn't, the actual physical aspect of the pain wouldn't integrate until it was integrated emotionally. And that's how I know that something physical, aside from breaking your arm or doing something physical to yourself that's going to need physical treatment. But, I also had back pain that I used to have between my shoulder blades. And let me tell you, nothing that I did, said, or even worked emotionally for years would do anything to it until I went through very particular emotional integration that I only, it took me through many different experiences until I got to an experience that would assist me move through that part of the emotional integration until that emotion came to my awareness. So the thing about it is we have a mental agenda with our body, but the way that the heart unfolds organically through this emotional integration work is at a very different rhythm. And if there is still physical pain coming up, especially related to the back, because the back is the past, that's why it's back, it's behind us, and especially lower back pain, which is about support, how we feel supported. Are we able to, or do we feel supported through the vibrational, or do we rely on support from the outer world? Support issues that's all lower back stuff. So, and those are very primal emotional signatures. And for many people, they will find that at least 3 times through the presence process to start touching on and having the capacity to respond directly to very causal core issues. So I just say, don't give up, stay the course emotionally. Sure, if you have a lot of physical back discomfort, and maybe something like acupuncture may give you some physical relief, or massage or something, take care of yourself physically. But don't lose sight of the emotional, and definitely don't entertain stories about failure and your, and doubt and all these things. These are just stories. None of them are true. And most of them, if you trace them, are coming directly from that emotional signature that you haven't yet, been able to tap into and integrate.
Okay, thank you. That is helpful. It often seems like this process causes more anxiety than anything else, because I just, it's like, it just doesn't seem to be working. But
one of the things that happens when we do this work, which we do not bargain on, especially work that causes us to become present, and what the presence process does is it does cause us to become more aware of our experience. And more awareness can also feel like an increase in pain, an increase in anxiety, and an increase in discomfort, which actually isn't true. What's really happening is we're not as numb as we used to be, and so we start to really feel what used to be covered up, what was sedated and controlled. And on one level, initially, it can look like a condition is getting worse. Actually, it's not true. We're just becoming more aware of it. And that awareness, in the final analysis, the tool of transformation of any condition is awareness. Unless we have awareness, and unless we bring awareness to the causal point, it's bringing awareness to it and being, the radiance of our beingness. That's what causes the transformation. That's what causes the alchemy. The work is getting to the point where we can become really aware of it. That, for many, is the struggle, and that's why I say, the first time someone's through the presence process, they have very physical interactions or physical awarenesses. The second time through, they may have a lot of mental insights and mental clarities coming. The third time through, the emotional stuff, really, about session 7, 8, and 9, boom, the emotional stuff really starts to come up. And by then, one has the tools and the capacity to respond to the emotions and to continue on that journey, because the emotional signatures that we carry within ourselves come to us from generations. So there is a lot there, and it's not yours your emotional signature. It's actually, on one level, it's our emotional signature, and that's your point of working on it. So it's an individual job that I can only do with myself, but actually we're working on collective fear, collective anger, collective grief. And so while it's still in the world and we're working on it, we're going to be working on it on some level. It's going to be manifesting in our experience. I'm very dubious of anyone who says, I've done it, I'm completely cleaned up, there's nothing to me to do, I don't have any pain, I never get triggered, I never get upset, I never get angry. And I normally look at a person like that and go, well, you're probably very well sedated and controlled, because we're living in a world that at the moment is in a state of process. And we're participants in this experience. We're not observers, we're participants. And the process will go on as long as it takes.
Great.
Michael,
thank you. That is helpful.
Thank you, Luna. Michael, would you like another question?
If there's another question, let's have another question.
Definitely. Forrest, it's your turn to ask Michael Brown a question.
Hello. I just want to say thank you so much to Jonathan and Dr. Sklar, just all of you and Dr. Murphy for organizing this. It's really exciting to have a chance to ask this question and to hear Dr. Sarno on the same line. I just want to say I am very new to the presence process. I help run a wiki where there's just a lot of enthusiasm about it. A bunch of people are really excited about it. And so I'm excited about it. And from what I know about it, it seems like there's a lot of connections between it and mindfulness meditation. I was wondering if you could just tell me a little bit about that connection. Or is there any connection?
Well, there does seem to be a connection, although mindfulness meditation isn't a sort of path that I ever walked, although I think many things that we do are mindful meditations without us calling mindful meditation. So I think mindful meditations may come through the realms like Eckhart Tolle's work and all that sort of thing. And there is definitely a connection between all these bodies of work. And I think the connection is, too, that if one digs deep enough into one's experience, doesn't matter who it is that digs deep enough, one is going to find a shared experience about what's going on, and we'll have different vocabularies of explaining it to ourselves. And if we all sat down in the same room, like if we've got all these doctors together and we all sat down and discussed things from our vocabulary, we would eventually find that we're all kind of talking about a similar thing, because we as human beings are pretty much on a similar journey together at the moment. We have just different ways of describing it to each other. So some may talk of it in Buddhist terminology, some may talk of it in Advaita terminology, some may talk of it in Eckhart's The Power of Now, pain body. Some may talk of pain body, and others talk of emotional signature. So it's important not to get too caught up in the vocabulary, but in what the intent is of the work. And the intent of the work is to bring us the awareness into our experience so that it may be transformed through our awareness. I think all of them have that shared intent.
Thank you. That sounds wonderful.
Good. Anything else for us?
That's it.
All right, thank you. Michael, a caller from Italy, Darren, has a very practical question. He says, I've been suffering with back pain. Let me back up. I have a question. I've started reading the presence process, wondering what to do if you don't have a bathtub to soak in. Forrest, can you, Michael, the caller, the person in the chat room wants to know what to do if you don't have a bathtub.
Well, in the new book, what I'm telling people to do and what I tell people to do over email is stand yourself in a quite a warm shower for 15 or 20 minutes, and then do as instructed in the book, which is dry yourself off immediately and go and tend to your breathing. Remember that, I still, that in every moment I say the way it is the way it's required. If you don't have a bathtub, that's what's required for you. You're not required to have a bathtub. You've got a shower, you use the shower. So use what is around us, because that's what works for us. That's what's required. Don't not do the process because you don't have a bathtub, or and now you have to travel across town to use a bathtub, whatever. Use what's at your disposal, and trust that every one step we take. I also believe greatly in grace. Every one step we take, many steps are taken for us. So use what is at your disposal.
I once initiated one of the water sessions in a bathtub in a cheesy motel in Henderson, Texas. I wish I'd known about the hot shower thing then. But on the other end of the spectrum, my wife and I, Dawn, when we were on we took a vacation to Playa del Carmen, the Yucatan Peninsula, and we found a great spa in Playa del Carmen and rented a tub. It was pretty interesting explaining to them what we wanted, but we initiated a session in Mexico in a huge hot tub with eucalyptus and candles. It was awesome.
Oh, yeah. And also, in hot springs, I used to do a lot of breathing when I used to visit. There's a place in Arizona called Eden Hot Springs, and they have graduated pools from the source all the way down into this massive, larger than Olympic-sized pool where all the hot springs lead into. But as the springs go down towards the pool, they graduated in temperature. So you can find certain pools that you can manage the temperature, and to lie and do breathing in the hot springs. I mean, that's where it's at. I'm sure that the Native Americans would do stuff like that. I'm sure, because these breathing techniques are not new. It's not something we've discovered. We've pretty much rediscovered them. But breathing outdoor in warm water, that's also useful.
So my question reminded me of someone else's question. They were interested in your saying that Mexico is the heart. And also that brings up, this may be related, the Mayan calendar in 2012. If you want to talk about either one of those, I'd love to hear it.
For me, my take on the Mayan calendar and what we're going through is related directly to the pathway of awareness, and that we're evolving along the pathway of awareness. Whereas, in the pathway of awareness, when we come into the world, we're going from the vibrational state, which is being in the womb, and then we're going into the emotional state, the emotional stage of childhood, the mental state, the education years of teenage years, where we get all that mental stuff put into us, and then into the physical of adulthood. And then when we enter spiritual practices, or we want to gain an awareness of what God is for us, we automatically reverse that pathway of awareness. For example, meditation, you first you sit in a physical posture, and then you do a mental mantra, which is to open the heart, which connects you through the feeling center into the vibrational experience. Humanity is moving along that pathway, and that we've gone through a very long physical period where it's, as we spoke about earlier, fire, food, water, shelter, very physical. And then we've entered a mental period of our development, which is not as long as the physical was, which is peaked. I mean, we're around the peak of our mental capacities with technology. Everyone's got a cell phone. It's a very mental experience we've been having, mental exploration. And now we've just entered the emotional aspect of our experience, which is as much shorter than the mental, is going to be as much shorter than the mental. In fact, some of the indigenous people I spoke to said, the physical goes on for millions, the mental goes on for thousands, and the emotional is for 13 years. And once the emotional is integrated, then we enter a vibrational awareness. And what that means is we become aware of our ultimate causality. So while we're in the world having a human experience as we are now, the causal point of the quality of our experience is the condition of our emotional body, because the vibrational is radiating through the emotional and reflecting into us mentally and physically what the condition is of the emotional. But the ultimate causal point of the what am I is the vibrational. And what the 2012 is an opportunity for people that are moving along consciously along this path of evolution is to integrate the emotional so that the emotional can open and there be no sedation and control of the emotional, so that the awareness can move directly into the vibrational. and to live on this planet from a point of vibrational awareness, even though we're in the physical, mental, and emotional experience, to be aware all the time of the vibrational aspect of our being, which is the same as to say, to live in the world but not be of it. And that is a cause for a very different type of creative experience than one in which we are identifying either with the physical or the mental or even with the emotional. So for me, 2012 is all about a portal of opportunity which opens in our evolutionary stage, which enables us to enter a vibrational awareness while we're in the physical, mental, and emotional. And of course, because vibrational awareness is the causal point of everything, to enter a multidimensional awareness, to become aware of other dimensions of activity, maybe even outside the physical, mental, emotional. But it starts with emotional integration, because if we don't do the emotional integration, then we're going to react to the emotional part of our journey, and the reacting to the emotional part of the journey is like running out into the traffic as opposed to staying home and processing my stuff.
Very good.
So that's my quick take on it.
My good friend Daniel wants me to ask a more specific question. He wants to know, is Mexico the heart and North America the head, metaphorically?
Well, I guess it would depend who you spoke to. So there's many points of view, and I'm open to them all. But whenever I crossed the border from the United States and into Mexico, I was very aware that I was going from the head and into the heart of my experience. And it was a very heart-orientated place. Although as the continents emerge and you know, the more tourists go down to Mexico, I went to a place 2 years ago that to me was just a place of heart. But when I visited after being away from it for 4 or 5 years, it was just a hedonistic place now. It was a place where people were just trying to make money, sell you cell phones, get you to buy stuff, and they'd gone into the consumer manipulating experience. The actual traditional lifestyle of the place was almost completely gone. And so the head can go in and infect the heart center too. So it just depends what's happening. The heart can also creep up and engage the head, which one will find in many places in the States, where people are coming up from the South American countries and are living more of a heart-orientated existence. So they seem to now be overlapping. But in the days that I went down there, it was to me, very much a heart experience. And in fact, I would notice that if you engaged with people in a very heart space down there, especially like the Huichol Indians, and when language was difficult, that they used to get confused if you were saying one thing with your words but meaning something else with your heart, because there was a connection there with the heart. So they would pick up what was going on in your heart. And if your words didn't know that, if your words were saying something else, there would be confusion. But if you spoke to them from your heart, even though they didn't understand your words, because you were talking from the heart, they understood completely what you were talking about. Language wasn't important. So that was my experience for me. And some people might say, well, if you want to go deeper into the heart, you might go into Chile or even further down south. But I think it's all points of view. So, there are different points of view about it. That was my point of view from my experience.
Thank you. Michael, I want to check out an insight I had during the presence process with you. I went to a medical school, my 20-year medical school reunion, and I was walking around the campus engaging in nostalgic and euphoric recall. And then at one point I was in a building and I looked down a stairway and I had a memory of something that I felt shame about that happened in medical school. There's nothing, crazy. I took a month off because I was depressed and talked to a therapist, and I came back, but because I was so perfectionistic, I felt shame about it. But the moment of insight was, I was doing the presence process, that I didn't feel shame because of what happened. What happened because of shame that had been imprinted on my emotional body, that I had the cause and effect relationship backwards.
and that
Right.
all there was for me to do was to be with, watch the shame as I would watch a bird in a tree. So I just wanted,
Right.
yeah.
Right. Well, I think because of our trance-fixed state, which is having the emotional body to some extent diminished, our awareness of it through felt perception diminished, and sometimes even shut down completely. Although we express ourselves emotionally through drama by getting angry and sad and everything, it's always about what someone else is doing to me, or what's happening in the world to me that makes me. They are making me angry. They are making me sad. They're making me afraid. Because of our felt expression is shut down, and especially during our schooling years when it's just mental development going on, and emotional expression, almost is not required in that environment at all. Then when we have experiences in the world in which our emotional signatures are surfacing, we don't have the felt experience that connects us to the causal point of it. And so what we do is we do identify things as the effect first before we see the cause. And so we can say, well, when I went there, that event caused me to go into shame. And that thing that I did in my behavior, or that thing that I thought, caused me to go into shame. But once we awaken our felt expression, it will become very obvious that it's the shame within us that is imprinted, whether it's the shame taking place between our relationship between our parents, however it was imprinted in us. It's actually the shame that's triggering that event in our lives. That is the causal point of that event manifesting in our lives. But for the most part, we walk around. The demonstration I used to give when I was presenting was throwing a pen across the room and saying, if I want to change the way I throw the pen, I would walk over to where it was lying on the floor and move it around on the floor and think, if I move the pen around on the floor over here where it landed, this is going to change the way that I'm throwing it. And the way that I'm throwing the pen is the condition of my emotional body. That's the imprint. The pen flying across the room is the mental body, and where it lands on the floor is the physical circumstance. And for most of us, we're engaging with either pen flying across the room that comes into our attention first of all, or seeing it where it's lying on the floor and saying, well, that must be the cause. It's lying on the floor here. So if I change the way it's lying on the floor, in other words, if I change my job, I will feel better about my work. If I change my companion, I'll feel better about my capacity for intimacy. And it's back to front, and that back to front is happening simply because we are, at the time, unable to feel the causal point that our felt expression is somewhat diminished or shut down.
Yeah.
And that's why it can be challenging to say to somebody who's going through a crisis, if they have diminished felt expression or shut down on their own emotional body, that you are responsible for your experience. It's offensive to somebody who lives within the effect. It's completely offensive to tell them that they're responsible for their experience. That awareness of that responsibility only really grows out of integrating emotional signatures, where I integrate an emotional signature within me and I see the impact it has on not only the way my thinking works around that particular experience or event, but I see the way that my relationship with that event completely changes, whether it completely goes off my radar screen or it doesn't even push my buttons anymore, and I see that change came through sitting with the emotional content within my being. Only when I see that do I start to realize that I have a point of responsibility. But before I can actually see that, to tell me that I'm responsible for my experience is offensive.
Michael, do you need to answer the door?
That's actually the phone, and because of the headphones I have in my head, there's no way I can get to it, but I'll leave a message.
All right. Jonathan, you have a question?
Yeah, Michael, I noticed something on your website a few months ago. You talked about a woman that you know and something you've experienced, the Transformational Breath Foundation in Judith Kravitz. And if someone wanted personal facilitation, you recommend that. I've never heard you really talk much about it other than what's on your website. I was curious what you have to say about that because I'm interested.
Well, much of my work that I did in the initial stages was through the breath work, through rebirthing and breathwork. That's I was initially trained through those modalities. And one of the reasons why I moved away from those modalities was I found, that a lot of the people doing that work, it's almost like they push themselves into the vibrational and completely skip the emotional part of the work. And so as facilitators, what they were doing is they were still projecting their emotional outcome or their agendas upon people they were breathing. Another thing I noticed was that they wanted you to integrate everything in that session. And yes, there were things that one could integrate fully in a session, but it never gave one the life skills to respond to life, because what ended up happening was the breathwork session became the chosen experience. Everything for me must happen in my breathwork session, and I'm the same with this about meditation. I don't expect any experience in meditation. Meditation is there to complement, to enhance the experience of my life when I walk into my life. And so one of the things about breathwork is it's very powerful, and it can get one addicted to the experience of the breathwork session. And then you can breathe people and put them through intense integration processes, and then leave them to walk out into their lives, and all sorts of shifts are happening, things are surfacing in their lives, but they can't recognize them as memories, and they become overwhelmed, oversensitive. It's like walking around with a raw, energetic nerve. And so I noticed a lot of that was going on, not because the breath workers, had bad intent, but just because they didn't actually quite themselves have the tools and know what they were doing around this. And so I moved away from that work because I saw the fallout. And I deliberately started to look at ways of how do I, make up for that? How do I learn to integrate my experiences in my daily life that are triggered through the breathing, etc., etc. So the wonderful thing about Judith Kravitz is that she has realized the benefits of the integrative tools and then combining that with the breath work that she does. She has seen, the purpose and the usefulness in that. And in fact, towards the end of the year, she's going to actually take her trainers, and she's been discussing this, is about taking her trainers and teaching them how to integrate the presence process into their training, so that when people leave the breathwork sessions, that they have these integrative, responsive tools to use. So what I recommend to people now is, the presence process is very good for teaching personal responsibility. It also, the breathing 15 minutes twice a day, it's very powerful, because what we're doing is we're sitting in the portal of being for 15 minutes twice a day. No matter what's going on with us mentally while we breathe, if we connect our breathing for 15 minutes twice a day, we sit within the range of that beingness. That beingness is going to activate movement within our emotional realm, whether we're initially aware of it or not. That movement is going to take place for us in our daily activities as events happening around us. So what the presence process does is it's teaching us how to integrate using the world as our palette, not just as some focused, quick 1 hour or 2 hour breathwork session. But there is a place for both. So the presence process teaches us responsibility, gives us a methodical way of opening the pathway up from the physical through the mental into the emotional. Shows us all sorts of things. There are so many perceptual tools in it. But for people that feel that they want to go deeper, and that they've done this work and they would like to go deeper, there is certain levels of the work that does require facilitation. It does require someone sitting there, if you are in agreement with him, that they can push you deeper, because you'll get to a point where you go, no, I don't want to go any deeper than this. I can't. I just don't have the capacity. I don't want to. Or resistance comes up. But with the breath work, you can go much deeper. If you go into that agreement with someone that, look, I want to go as deep as I possibly can, they can sit with you. And Judith, from what I've heard, because I haven't worked with her directly yet, but I've had an immense amount of feedback from people that have done the presence process and have gone to her, also from people that have come from her and into the presence process. And she is masterful at her comprehension of breath work. And so I absolutely trust her in the way that she is teaching people and what she thinks is required for the work. The intents overlap. I know that she would have different intents and work with different tools and perceptual procedures that I may do through the presence process. but they definitely overlap with each other. And I encourage anybody who's done the present process, who's curious enough to go deeper to their experience, and is just even from a point of pure exploration, curiosity, is to find a trained breathwork facilitator, and to give yourself that experience, and not just to do it once, but to find a way to set it up too, that you do it as a process, that you're going to do at least 5 to 10 breathwork sessions so that you can actually see what the breathwork is. But it is an absolutely profound tool. Much of the insight I gained about breathing and about many aspects of this work came to me through my initial breathwork sessions. So, I attribute that, as much as I attribute ceremony and plant medicine and all the many other things I did to go and do research. The breathwork and the rebirthing were absolutely crucial in showing me the capacity for breath to enable us to enter the emotional body and to bring to awareness things that are completely out of our mundane awareness.
Yeah, and that brings up for me that I had an email conversation with you about this. I started doing your approaching vibrational awareness practice, and my life experience turned into what felt like a train wreck, and I realized I backed off just a little bit because I became so aware of my emotional body that it was extreme pain in my life, and I just backed it off a little bit. I just went about 10 minutes less, and I was able to be a little more comfortable and still in it. So I love all the tools.
Well, one of the things that we do, one of the things that we tend to do, in fact, 99% of the case of anyone who writes to me by email and says, I'm doing the presence process and it's overwhelming, I just can't cope. And you said in the book that, you wouldn't receive more than you can deal with. And I always ask the same question, well, what did you intend? Did you intend to do it all at once? Did you intend to integrate your entire emotional body the first time through the presence process? Are you in such discomfort in yourself and so desperate that you want to fix this all right now? Because if you set that intention, you are going to unload on yourself more than is required. You're going to bring it up on yourself. And what's really required is always to remember that there's a word, gentleness. And there's no hurry in eternity. I don't know what the hurry is in eternity, but gentleness is it's very important when we enter the emotional body, that we are responsible, that we're compassionate, and that we're gentle. And going in and saying, I'm going to fix all the stuff going on that's imbalanced within me at once, I'm going to integrate it all now, is definitely not compassionate, it is definitely not responsible, and it's definitely not gentle. And from people that I've brought this to attention, just about every single one of them said, yes, I am trying to do it all at once. And then as long as you say, look, I want to back off a bit, I don't have to do this all at once. Let's take it one day at a time. There's no hurry. I know I'm in an uncomfortable situation, but let me do it at a pace that's comfortable and gentle for me, and then you'll find the entire nature of the journey will change. And I do get a lot of people coming to this work that are in a very desperate place, and they want desperate, they're looking for desperate measures. They're looking for instant, quick release. And most of them are trying to get rid of their pain. They're not trying to integrate it either. And that can also cause problems when we enter this work saying, I want to get rid of my fear, I want to get rid of my anger, I want to get rid of my grief. And we don't want to get rid of those things because those are just energetic circumstances that are behaving unconsciously. But when that same energy, for example, when fear is brought to awareness, fear becomes discernment. When anger is brought into awareness, anger becomes the capacity to move and assert ourselves in the world. When grief is brought into full awareness and integrated, grief develops within us the capacity to feel very deeply what's going on in our world without falling over. So we don't want to get rid of these energetic experiences. We want to ascend into their highest potential, to the attributes that they are. So it's all about intent. And that's why I spend a lot of the time initially in the book is assisting people to clarify their intent, because intent is at some point in the emotional work, intent becomes everything. The nature of the emotional experience when we're integrating that stuff is really governed by our intent.
Oh, great feedback. Thank you.
Michael,
Michael, it occurs to me that gentleness has really fallen out of our vocabulary here in the States. So that's a tough sell, that you can't have it all today.
Yes.
I think we're taught from a very young age here that, you can have it all today and you just have to go and get it. So that's there's a cultural tendency toward lack of gentleness, I guess, in the United States, certainly.
Yes. Well, gentleness is very important because there's an aspect to the human experience that one cannot enter until one incorporates gentleness into one's life. We're not going to be allowed into certain aspects of our experience or the experience of humanity unless we know about gentleness. And also, part of this work is growing up, and growing up is learning to differentiate between what I want and what is required. And we've been grown up, the capitalist consciousness is you can have whatever you want as long as you work for it. You can have whatever you want, and that's just ridiculous. Because want is what destroys our planet. And want is driven by trying to feel better about myself. If I do this, if I do that, if I get what I want, I will feel better. I will, instead of getting better at feeling. Whereas what we require, an experience that comes to us, if experiences come to us that we don't want, it's most likely that's what we require. And when we enter this emotional work, we start learning to discern between what we want, which is all about instant gratification, is about recovery, about covering up, about sedation and control. All that is related to want, to what's required. And required is what is most essential for our emotional growth as beings at the moment in this world. And that's the transition point that we actually are being asked to move through as humanity, because if humanity cannot discern between want and requirement, it will destroy itself. It will destroy itself.
Right.
Michael, is the presence process available as an audiobook?
Not yet. One of the projects for this year is to record it as an audiobook. And I must admit, I have not been on the ball with it. I received the recording equipment a while back, and I have kind of fiddled with it, and I had a bit of feedback and buzz with it. So I haven't really cleared the space to turn it into an audiobook. And I'm also wondering still how we're going to do this. As in, how does one actually turn this into an audiobook? So, one can read it all and put it into CDs and send it off like that. But I think it needs somewhat different attention because each session is going to have to be in its own space and all these sorts of things. But the intent is to get it into audio because I do think that it will make it a lot more accessible as such.
Well, actually, I have some fear, as you were talking about turning it into an audiobook, I had some fear come up. And my fear is, so why would we want it as an audiobook? And we want things as an audiobook so we can multitask, so we can listen to it while we're driving. And the whole concept of doing the presence process while driving scares the hell out of me, So.
That's one of my concerns about doing it as an audiobook, because I think sitting with the text does cause one to become more present with what the communication is, what it's trying to be communicated through this work.
Yeah, I'm actually
the audiobook.
I'm going to resist the urge.
Yeah. Well, the audio capacity for me is, for people that are do not have sight or do not have hearing and do not have sight. To develop an audiobook. And what I've been doing for people that do not have sight is I send them the document as a Word document, and there are softwares that you can download off the internet that will read Word documents to you. And there are many people that are doing the presence process who do not have sight, who are doing it through having the Word document read to them, and they appear to be doing it just as well as any of us. So there's always a way if one is really...
Yeah, that makes sense. So I guess what I'd say is I don't have a problem with you turning it into an audiobook. I just would want the bookseller to require somebody to prove that they're blind before they can buy it.
Then I can walk in and say, I'm perceptually blind because I can't see the errors of my ways.
Splitting hairs.
Because we're all blind on some level, and that's what this work shows us, how we can be completely unaware of aspects of our experience that are having a massive impact on the quality of our experience, and how we can move through the whole of life thinking someone else is responsible for that until it's, we're shown through this work that it's something happening within us. And until we see it, we are, I was blind, but now I can see. That's what the emotional body work does. I was deaf, but now I can hear. And what that means is, my experience has been shouting at me for years to look at something, but I couldn't hear it because I couldn't understand its language. And that's one of the things the presence process does, is it gives us enhances our vocabulary so we can start having this communication with the inner causal point of our experience.
Yeah, stop stubbing your emotional toe with increased perception. Yeah. So, Michael, this seems like a good wrapping up point. Will you come on the show again after the second version of the presence process comes out?
I would love to.
We would love to.
Just talk to Kathy, and she will set it up. She's the cog in the wheel of the interviews.
Very good. Thank you so much. Your work makes a huge difference in my practice.
Yeah, and thank you for all the other guests you invited on. I was grateful to hear their points of view, and thank the listeners who phoned in and asked questions, and the people who came through the chat room, and I love the participation of that. And I'm up for more dialogue about it too, so yeah, I'm up for the conversation to continue anytime.
Thank you very much.
John, yeah, thanks, Michael.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Michael.
We will talk
and
to you
here's
soon.
the outro.
All right.
Until next time.
All right.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you for listening.
Bye-bye.
If you like the show, make the show a favorite and tell your friends about it.